A couple weeks ago, we started Zechariah, read the first two chapters. And one of the things that we saw in Zechariah is that he has dreams. He sees things. And we saw that right away. He sees angels, very much like Ezekiel. He goes back to that prophetic discussion of seeing things and seeing signs, and using that as a way of teaching people, which again, even in Isaiah, we have Isaiah sees angels. But Isaiah's 66 chapters and the angel visions are diluted by the prophecy and the poetics and the pleas to the people. Zechariah is so heavy with dreams and so heavy with these signs and somewhat apocalyptic and somewhat well, we'll read it, you'll see it, but these are things that are very, very pronounced in Zechariah. Yeah, you're going to see it right away. Yeah, we're going to get to this right. We're going to get it right away. He's mentioned. Yeah, well, we'll get to the line. So, Rosemary, if you'd be so kind as to start us in chapter 3, which is where these dreams continue. There's the whole book almost is Zechariah's dreams, and this is a continuation of the dream, or a continuation of these visions that he has, and we don't know over how long these dreams had necessarily over his life, but it is the preponderance of the text in Zechariah, these dreams. So it's going to go on for pretty much the rest of the book. All right, so chapter 3, Rosemary. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
All right.
I was further shown Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of God, and the accuser standing at his right to accuse him. But the angel of God said to the accuser, God rebukes you, O accuser. God who has chosen Jerusalem rebukes you, for this is a brand plucked from the fire.
Okay, so let's just analyze these first two verses for a moment or two. These are significant. As Sheldon says, this is the second time that he knows of a mention of Satan in there. So what's the other one? Job, right. There's another one too, which is a mention, a scene that happens in Chronicles, and it's also in Samuel, where David takes a census of the people. In the book of Chronicles, that same census says that Satan agitated David, or guided David to do that census, which seems to be kind of like, a way of getting David off the hook a little bit for doing the census. But here we see Satan. And our Bible, our translation, consciously does not translate it as Satan, as Satan, uses the word accuser. Mary, what does your Bible say? Yeah. So a Christian Bible has no issue using Satan, but it should say the Satan. And it doesn't say the Satan, does it? It says just Satan. His name is Ha-Satan, the Satan, the accuser, which is why the accuser with a capital A is a good translation, because it's clearly, however you're going to translate it, it should be a capital in a title of the person. Does that, you have the same translation, right, John?
Mine just says accuser.
Yeah, it's the same one. Some of the other translations today will have the adversary. The role that the Satan plays here, and to some extent, obviously in Job as well, is not the prince of darkness. It is not the Antichrist. The Christian Bible develops, and again, they didn't invent it. They took it from Jewish literature from the time, and Jewish literature from the time is 300 years after this. At this point in time in the Bible, in Jewish consciousness, Satan does not act as a separate agent of separate to God. Satan is very clearly, as you can see from this, one of the angels or one of the people with God who has a role to play in the heavenly court. And we've talked about this before. This is the defending your life angel of the adversary or the prosecuting attorney, who's the angel whose job it is to tell God all the bad things that the person has done. And in this case, Joshua, representing the people, the Jewish people, the Israelites, the remnant of Judah, are standing before God and in the heavenly court. And the accuser's job is to say everything bad that these people have done. Or in this case, this person representing the people, his job is to accuse. So I actually talked about this at the last Yom Kippur, but I don't expect people to go back in time to remember this. But I love the story of the people who, the Jewish imagination about this, not about Satan, but about the prosecuting attorney, which is we don't like the guy. We don't like him because he brings out all the bad things that we do. And that, especially when we get to the high holidays, God is weighing out our merits and demerits. And we don't want Satan to be there with the information. And so I told the story, it's called The Holy Thief, about a thief who dies. He goes to heaven. He sees, this is on the eve of Rosh Hashanah when this process starts. He sees the Satan with the file, so to speak, his briefcase full of all the information of what we've done. And the holy thief, who's a great thief, but he's going to hell, right? He's been thieving his whole life. He realizes this is the moment he was created for. And he bumps into the prosecuting attorney, the Satan, takes his file and tosses it into hell, into the fires, and it burns it up. And so none of the people get to be prosecuted because he stole it and he destroyed it. And so the holy thief, of course, is rewarded for his act of trying to help everyone. But it's a story that is about Mark Borovitz to some extent. Mark used it in the story. He called himself the book, The Holy Thief, and he's the guy who started Beit Teshuvah here in LA, or one of the founders. I mean, Harriet Rosetto, his wife, was really the founder, but he was the guy who kind of got it into the next level, which is a place where people could find help as they're trying to get their lives back together. But Mark was in prison many times and had talked about his own failures as a father, as a human being. And so the Holy Thief story he opens his book with, because it's a story about someone using their bad skills to eventually figure out how to turn it to the positive. But the story is illustrative of what Satan is, which is he's just the guy who tells God all the bad things you do. That makes him not our friend, right? We don't like the guy, but he isn't the one who necessarily makes us do the bad stuff. That is a later development, and that really was a force and a borrowing of the Zoroastrian philosophy that we got from Persia. The longer we were around the Persians, the more that kind of seeped into our thought. And the Persians were Gnostic dualists who believed in a light side and a dark side, as in what we see in May the 4th be with you, right? We just came out of Star Wars weekend, and that's very much based on Zoroastrian philosophy. By the way, there was an interesting article, I think in the Atlantic this last week, about the Zoroastrian community hanging on in India right now. They've been completely persecuted by the Iranian government, and they're disappearing, but there's still a community in India. And they believe in this light side and dark side. And the longer the Jews were around that Persian influence, the more that seeped into it. And they really have this strong dualistic idea that eventually became very much a part of our philosophy. And then, of course, within Christianity, what Christianity developed out of that Jewish philosophy, where the accuser takes on a much more pronounced role and actually, of course, becomes a force of evil, not just the one who talks about our evil, but the one who actually makes us do evil or leads evil or creates evil. But again, all of this is kind of predicated on this idea that you need to have a really good villain if you have a really good hero. And the more that the Messiah, or again, later on for Christians, the Christ, if you have a Christ, you have to have an Antichrist. And the battle between good and evil, led by representatives on earth, became a very important idea. It doesn't exist here, which is why our translations don't use the word Satan, because it's laden with so much, we've all seen The Exorcist, we've all seen The Omen. We all have our preconceived notions of what Satan is. If Satan only exists as the prosecuting attorney, it's not nearly as scary. And so that's what Satan is here. And he is in the book of Job. Because in the book of Job, he basically tells God, and we'll read Job coming up, he tells God, look, none of these people are that good. And God says, what about Job? And Satan says, yeah, well, let's let Job have a rough life for a couple of days, and then we'll see how good Job is. So that's about the worst that Satan does, was kind of goad God into a test, which is what Job is to some extent a test to see whether human beings are really, are they really good? And so Satan, starts to, even there, though, Satan is working within the framework, within the rules of what God lets him do. But again, that's also a fairly late book. And we don't see the word Satan used anywhere in the Torah. This is technically, because we don't know, again, when Job was written. We definitely feel it has a Babylonian Persian influence. But as far as historically, this is the first time we can actually say this guy is talking about him, and he lives in the 500s, right? This is 500s, early 500s. So Judaism has existed for, at least by this point, 1,000 years, and we haven't heard Satan's name once. So this whole concept of having an accuser, having then again later on an actual force for evil, that's not in the Torah. That's not in all the way through the time of King David. Like we have no evidence, and there's no reason to believe by any like almost mention of Satan or a prosecuting attorney. We don't even have any of that in the Bible through the time of King David up through Isaiah. I mean, all those prophets, up through really, again, Jeremiah. We don't have anywhere where Satan is mentioned or even like remotely mentioned. There's no way to even say, oh, but they're kind of alluding to that, or maybe that's what's there. Again, for people who go back and read the Bible, they'll see that, or they'll look for that, or they'll say, well, that, Satan was the snake in the Garden of Eden. Well, really, where do you get that from? Because you want it to be there, but it's not there. And the serpent is clearly just a serpent who gets punished by having to crawl around on his belly, which is an explanation for why snakes crawl around on their belly and why we don't like them. So again, there's no indication that anyone earlier than this has any remark about Satan at all. Okay?
So
This phrase, though, God rebukes you, O accuser, right? Verse 2. Mary, what does your translation say? Rebuke thee, O Satan. Okay? Somebody was going to say something. Sorry. Somebody in our virtual community was going to say something.
changed my mind.
Oh, okay. But this idea of, what happens here, with Zechariah, having this vision of Satan and the angel, the angels on both sides, the angels of the Lord and Satan. And when the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, right? you get this idea that Satan isn't loved by Satan. Satan is on, isn't liked by God when he says, God rebukes you, accuser. But what really is happening here is you're going to see is God is basically telling Satan, it's over. I'm not angry with these people anymore. So stop giving me grief about them. I'm done. I want to put that past me, right? I'm not thinking about that anymore, Satan. So get away from me. Get away from me with the negativity, right? I don't want to hear it anymore. That's what Zechariah is seeing here. That's what's playing out here. You'll see this. Okay? So that's what, get away from me, Satan. But we say that, you've heard that phrase before. Get away, Satan, That's where it comes from. This is where it comes from. Satan, get behind me, This kind of get away from me. But it's clearly what it is I don't want to hear any more negativity about these people. Let's see what happens. You'll see.
Now Joshua was clothed in filthy garments when he stood before the angel. The latter spoke up and said to his attendants, "Take the filthy garments off him." And he said to him, "See, I have removed your guilt from you, and you shall be clothed in priestly robes." Then he gave the order, "Let a pure diadem be placed on his head." And they placed the pure diadem on his head and clothed him in priestly garments as the angel of God stood by.
So you can see, we're starting over. It's a fresh start. Joshua, the high priest, been a clean bill of spiritual health. This guy is ready to go again. The Jews are back in town. I like them again. I'm done punishing them. They're on my good side now. That's what he's saying. We're going to fix this guy up and he's going to get back to work.
And the angel of God charged Joshua as follows. "Thus said God of hosts, if you walk in my paths and keep my charge, you in turn will rule my house and guard my courts, and I will permit you to move about among these attendants. Hearken well, O high priest Joshua, you and your fellow priests sitting before you, for those men are a sign that I am going to bring my servant, the branch."
Yes. So the priest is given power first. Put a crown on his head. They clean him up. And now they're saying, I'm going to give the tzemach, the branch, I'm going to bring them back. Now, of course, they're my servant, the branch, right? The job of the king is to represent me on this planet. But I'm bringing back the branch. And we've talked about this before. Tzemach David, the branch of David, right? The branch Davidians, folks. That's where the word comes from. The branch Davidians were the branch of David. That's what they called themselves, Tzemach David. David Koresh called himself in that group the branch Davidians. They were the branch. Where does it come from? Right here. It comes from this discussion. This isn't the first time we've seen the word branch before, but that's what they're talking about. So we're talking about it. Now remember what he did. David Koresh, and I forgot his real name. I forgot his name for a second. It doesn't matter. But David Koresh took the names of the Jewish king, David, and the Persian king, Koresh, or Cyrus, and brought them together to say that I'm both the Jewish king and the Gentile king. So Cyrus was proclaimed by God at the very end of the book of Chronicles. Literally the last chapters of our Bible say that Koresh was considered to be a Messiah, a ordained by God type king. Why? Because he was the king who let the Jews come back. And so Koresh was the Gentile king, Messiah. David was the Jewish king, Messiah. And so he brought both together. He was the Messiah for both Jews and Gentiles. So that's why he chose that name. The interesting thing, of course, is, again, people have been hoping for that branch, and it's a symbol that's used in medieval art, and it's been used in other places to represent the branch of David, which, again, people believe that Jesus was that branch, and so he's sometimes called the branch of David. And you'll see that, or sometimes in titles of other churches, they'll talk about the branch. But again, it is very connected to the literal ruling of the house of David, right? The priest, you do your job. I'm going to make sure you stay around, but I'm also bringing back my king. Now, remember, again, these were two different positions, the priest and the king. They're both important. They were both supposed to be separate individuals. And of course, the last Jewish kings, the Maccabees, were not. They were combined priests and kings, and that was not the way it was supposed to be. They were not supposed to be the same person. There's supposed to be a priestly king and also a ruling king, a Davidic king. They were supposed to be different people, as you see from here. So, yeah, they were not supposed to be the same person.
For mark well this stone that I placed before Joshua, a single stone with 7 eyes. I will execute its engraving, declares God of hosts, and I will remove that country's guilt in a single day. In that day, declares God of hosts, you will be inviting each other to the shade of vines and fig trees.
And we talked about that before. The prophets talking about vines and fig trees as a symbol of peace, of living in peace. I told you that's what George Washington declared, that we would be living in peace under our fig trees. Fine. So 7 eyes. What the heck is this? Right? This stone apparently symbolizes the power, God-given power of the future Davidic ruler. Well, we'll see that a little bit in this next chapter. Yeah, we've seen a little bit of vision, a little bit of his visions. You ain't seen nothing yet. These visions are so far pretty explainable. Again, a single stone with 7 eyes. Nah, leaves a little bit of explanation, and again, seems pretty wild. The horns that we read about a couple weeks ago, symbolic, a little hard to process. It's going to get weirder, I promise. Right now, actually.
He's still in dream.
Yeah. Well, it seems like. Well, let's look at this next line.
The angel who talked with me came back and woke me as someone is wakened from sleep.
So that's what he says. So whatever the vision that he was on, he was kind of asleep. It was like sleep. That's what he says. It was like sleep, like somebody who was asleep. So I kind of was like asleep, but I wasn't. And it doesn't matter because now it's like another vision, and it's clearly like I've been woken and I'm now in another vision. And
It's like one of those dreams where you think you've woken up, but you haven't.
You haven't woken up. Yeah. So but this seems to be somewhat like a lucid dream, because as the angel is speaking to him, and of course, as he's recounting it to us, the angel is actually having dialogue with him. And here's what happens.
He said to me, what do you see? And I answered, I see a lampstand, all of gold, with a bowl above it. The lamps on it are 7 in number, and the lamps above it have 7 pipes. And by it are 2 olive trees, one on the right of the bowl and one on its left. I in turn asked the angel who talked with me, what do those things mean, my Lord? Do you not know what those things mean? Asked the angel who talked with me, and I said, no, my Lord.
So this is an interesting discussion, because it's not just a discussion, because well, that would be weird too anyways, because it's not just a dream where you see things. There's a dream where he's having a discussion. And what's interesting about the discussion is that the angel seems somewhat surprised that he doesn't know what these things mean. Like, do I have to tell you what these things mean? And so that's what's interesting about this, is that it's not only a discussion, it's not only a dialogue, it's a dialogue which requires, to some extent, us as the people who are hearing this to understand that Zechariah doesn't understand what he's seeing either. I mean, he just said that, which is interesting, because you'd think like he's a prophet, God is showing him these things, but he's seeing things that he doesn't understand. So he doesn't understand them. He says he doesn't understand them. I think that's significant, because people forget. They think that Isaiah, Ezekiel, all these people see these dreams and they like know exactly what's happening in them. This is pretty clear. He doesn't know what these dreams mean. He says, I don't. Okay.
Then he explained to me as follows. This is the word of God to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, said God of hosts.
Yeah. Read the next paragraph and we'll stop.
Whoever you are, O great mountain in the path of Zerubbabel, turn into level ground, for he shall produce that excellent stone. It shall be greeted with shouts of beautiful, beautiful.
Does not have to be translated as beautiful. Fen can mean grace or beauty. It could also mean, Mary?
It says
Grace. Yeah. Grace. Yeah. So chen, we've talked about before, is grace or beauty or something that people look at and say, wow, that's clearly what we're supposed to have, right? That is like, that's the full package. And it's like divine, this is not just something that is great. But what's interesting about this is that this is a prophecy about Zerubbabel, who we talked about is the Davidic line king, potential king, king wannabe, if you will, who, if Joshua is going to be the priest, Zerubbabel is going to be the king, and they're going to work together. Wow, that's great. We have a political leader and a religious leader, and we're coming back just like, Solomon had, his priest Zadok and good king has a good priest to help him. They work together in tandem, taking care of the religious and political needs of the people. They're my servants. They work for me, God. They do the right thing. And Zerubbabel is going to be, he's going to be great. That's what the vision says. Now, I'm not going to ruin the end for this for you, but none of you have heard of Zerubbabel. So there's a reason why this prophecy didn't come true. This didn't happen. Zerubbabel did not become the king of Judah. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Maybe God wanted it to happen. Maybe it should have happened, but it didn't happen. And you know that because you've never heard of this man. But we have heard of this phrase, right? Not by might, not by power, but by spirit. This line becomes crucially important for us. It becomes important for Christians too. It's a beautiful line of the Bible. It's one of the most powerful lines of the Bible, right? Of course, Debbie Friedman turned it into a great song, right? The problem is that the context of this seems to be one of a restoration of a Davidic monarch that's not going to happen through, it's not going to happen through war. It's not going to happen through bloodshed. It's going to happen again through spirit, through the good will of, of people. Here, I'm going to play you just a little snippet of Debbie Friedman, so you can see it or hear it, I should say. 1 second. Let me. It's not really a video clip, but let me play a little bit of this. Yeah.
Not by might and not by power, but by spirit alone shall all men live in peace. Not by might
So that song definitely comes out of the 60s, right?
Yeah.
Whoa. Is that better? Yeah. Nope. All right, now it's done. Yeah, so that song definitely came out of the 60s and 70s. It definitely came out of the folk music time, right? By the way, I just realized I did not share this on Facebook. Sorry, Facebook. I'll share it later. I'll share it as a video later, but I apologize in advance to those who are watching this on Facebook of why it didn't appear at the time. It's just I forgot. Again, the context is not what you'd think would become the message that it is, but it is. It's one of the most powerful and most famous parts of any of the prophets, because the message that the Bible conveys here is that what really is substantial and long lasting, and to some extent, again, what the vision of what real peace and power is it doesn't come by might. It doesn't come by force, right? It comes by spirit and God's spirit, right? My spirit, Ruach. And that's what, again, we take for granted that this idea is like the vision of religious leaders in the West, right? This idea that we wouldn't have to intimidate and force people to do the right thing or to be at peace. It would only, that it would only come through a military dictatorship or people, paying homage to one king. That's what Israel has already dealt with. Judah, by this point, has already dealt with the Persians now. They live under the Persians. They dealt with the Babylonians, and they dealt with, before that, with the Assyrians. And so they've already encountered empire, and to some extent, we encountered empire with the Egyptians, but true expansionary empires that we've seen from Mesopotamia, we've already encountered them. And our response to this is that God works not through military force, but through spirit. That's how real change will happen. Again, this is the first time in human history any people have expressed the idea that true peace, that real lasting goodwill between people will be accomplished through God's Spirit, not by power. Right? We take it for granted that that's just the way people feel. Well, first of all, we know they don't feel that way. They didn't feel that way in Nazi Germany. They didn't feel that way in Stalin's Soviet Union. But we were the first people in the world to articulate this vision. That it's going to be about this prophecy. And you can find these words all around the world today, with carved into buildings, because we believe that, that this is the vision that, there really will be peace. There'll really be peace this way. So, yeah, we'll find it around the world, translated into many different languages. This line from Zechariah 4:6. So clearly the context is to Zerubbabel, the would-be king of Judah. But again, out of context, we use that phrase, as a vision for how, and not just us, but humanity. But here's where it comes from the first time. So, any questions, comments? Anybody want to say where they've seen that before or heard that, but again, that's where it comes from. Zechariah. And again, not a very famous prophet, not a very well-known prophet, but those words are very well known. All right, let's continue then.
And the word of God came to me. Zerubbabel's hands have founded this house, and Zerubbabel's hands shall complete it. Then you will know that it was God of hosts who sent me to you. Does anyone scorn a day of small beginnings? When they see the stone of distinction in the hand of Zerubbabel, they shall rejoice. Those 7 are the eyes of God, ranging over the whole earth.
And so there we go back, that reference to the 7 eyes, that somehow this is 7 eyes of God seeing everything. I don't know why you have to say that this is some type of reference to a mystical idea that we really don't know much of. But this idea that, God, first of all, obviously 7 represents the 7 days of the week, the 7 days of wholeness, of completion, but that this is God's, it says right here, the 7 eyes are God seeing everything that happens. But, look, these are the visions that Zechariah has. This line by itself is a great one to remember. Does anyone scorn a day of small beginnings? Right? Why would you make fun of where we're starting from right now? Everything starts off small, and that's part of the beauty of it, right? It starts off small, right? The garage where Apple computers started, right? That we love celebrating that, and we should celebrate that. You shouldn't make fun of something that starts off small. So they're saying this temple that we're building right now, this temple in Jerusalem, is not very auspicious. It doesn't look like it's going to be a great thing. But why would you make fun of it? Because that's the way it's starting. And again, why do they have to say that? Because when Solomon built the first temple, it was a huge undertaking. Everyone saw it. It was a massive undertaking. It was a regional. I mean, all the tribes got behind it from one end of the country to the other, workers from Phoenicia. And this is a tiny little thing at this point. It's a tiny little building, the temple. It's not very impressive, but it's what God wants. And Zerubbabel he's going to get credit for it. This is going to be a big thing. So what Zechariah is doing is encouraging the people to see beyond the moment. Don't think that this is just a little thing we're doing right now, and we should, it's not as big as it should be, because there's clearly people walking around going, "You call this a temple? My grandparents worshipped at the temple, and this is no temple." Right? That's what they said.
And what, I asked him, are those 2 olive trees, one on the right and one on the left of the lampstand? And I further asked him, what are the 2 tops of the olive trees that feed their gold through those 2 golden tubes? He asked me, don't you know what they are? And I replied, no, my lord.
So again, back to that menorah that he had seen in the dream. By the way, we read this part at Hanukkah. Hanukkah, because it talks about the menorah. And it talks about these 2 trees that are on the menorah made out of gold. And they have a tube. And the tube goes down and it feeds the lamps. So the oil goes in from that tube and then fills up the lamps. So instead of going around and filling up all the lamps, you fill up the top thing and then the 2 things, and then it feeds the rest of the things, right? It feeds the rest of the menorah, the rest of the lamp, the rest of the oil pieces, right? So he says, what are those 2 things? Remember those 2 things there? You can probably guess what those 2 things are. Yeah. What? The lamps? Yeah, it's right back here. I'll show you. Here, it's right here. Verse 2. You see it. I see a lampstand of olive gold with a bowl above it. The lamps on it are 7 in number, and the lamps above it have 7 pipes. And by it are 2 the olive trees on the right and left of the bowl, right? On the right and left. They're bowls that feed these lamps. So again, we read this because of the menorah for Hanukkah, which we light the menorah, which represents the menorah that was destroyed, right? But remember something, in the midst of celebrating Hanukkah and reading the story about the oil, we are supposed to remember that even though the Maccabees were warriors, they fought with God's help. And at the end of the day, it's not about the fight, it's about what it represents, and it's about the fact that we want to live in peace. And so we sing that song at Hanukkah. Usually we think about those words from Zechariah because we read that from, that's the Haftarah that we read during Hanukkah. And it reminds us that as much as we're celebrating the Maccabees' victory, we know that it's not about physical, it's not about defeating people physically, which, by the way, is a really important idea right now too. Because Israel will win this war. Israel will defeat Hamas in this stage right now. Hamas will be completely destroyed after these last brigades, these battalions are wiped out in Rafah. But Israel's victory is not going to come about through that. Israel must continue to wage a war for the hearts and minds of the world, and to remind people again constantly that this war started because people were captured and held hostage and murdered and raped, and civilians were targeted intentionally, clearly, and this is terror. And it also, by reminding people that Israel never wanted to fight this war and doesn't want to fight any wars. And Israel needs to continue to get that message out to people. So that's going to be, and we all know that because Israel is losing the war of PR. And many people ask me, why is Israel not doing a better job? Look, there's a lot of reasons for it. There's not one reason for why Israel's doing that poorly in the war for public opinion. But it's also, again, about reminding people constantly that Israel has never fought a war because it wanted to fight a war. It's always fought wars for its survival. And again, even in this case, we have people who are saying that, that's not the case. But honest people will say, hey, look, what are you going to do? How is Israel supposed to respond? And there are Palestinians who've come forward, and again, they've had the courage to say, Hamas gets everything that's happening to them they deserve. So anyways, it's a good lesson for right now. Because this war we will not be able to come out of it and go, look how we destroyed Hamas, look how many battalions of Hamas we killed, and no one's going to say to us, oh, you did a great job. Israel, you're the best army man for man in the world. No one's going to say, oh, that's great. You know that. So here's the last part of this verse, this last verse of the chapter. What do these two oils represent?
Then he explained, they are the two anointed dignitaries who attend the sovereign of all the earth.
It's Joshua and Zerubbabel.
Yeah.
They're the oil. They're the oil that's feeding the menorah. The two bowls, the two oils, oil buckets, if you are the ones that are going to feed the people. They're going to take care of the people. They're the high priest and the king. So they are the two bowls. They are the two tops of the olive trees that feed the gold. What's amazing about it is they're beautiful. Look at these two bowls that are feeding the rest of the oil, but they only work because they feed the oil that is below them. So if these people are kings and high priests, that's great. They get a great amount of attention and respect and everything else. But the oil passes through them and goes to everybody, goes to all the rest of the bowls. That's where the light is. The light is with the bowls. They only hold it for a second. They're channeling it, but the oil doesn't stay there. It goes down to the bowls, going out to everybody. Those two guys. Those are the two dignitaries. Oh, the sovereign of the earth is God. Yeah. Those Adon kol haaretz is one of the terms we have for God. God is Adon, the master of all the earth. So they're God's. They're the ones who stand in. Ha'omdim means literally they stand in for God. They're God's emissaries here in this world. So that's the two guys, Joshua and Zerubbabel. So that is one vision. Chapter 4 is one of those visions. That one's pretty straightforward, actually, my friends. This is not where it gets weird because, again, to some extent, what's interesting about this is, and of course, what's powerful about it is chapter 4, verse 6, which is not by might, not by power. But what's also interesting is that, again, Zechariah doesn't know what he's seeing. He doesn't really understand what he's seeing. He is constantly saying, yeah, I have no idea what you're showing me. And God explains it. Okay. But the actual visions and the things that we see that we don't really understand, and we don't understand the symbolic nature of it, are about to hit us. Maybe the one thing we've seen so far is the eyes, the seven eyes. Like, we don't really know what that means. Again, it could represent seven completion of, the seven, like the seven oil, the seven lights on the menorah. But I'm only telling you, it's going to get weirder, and we don't know exactly what is happening here, other than, like, okay, maybe Zechariah is describing this and that's just what he sees. But there seems to be stuff here that we don't understand, that either people understood because there was a context for it and they heard other dreams and other things that they knew about, or, like, we just don't understand the context for some of these things, and like the similarities that maybe had with other literature at the time. You'll see.
I looked up again and I saw a flying scroll. What do you see? He asked. And I replied, a flying scroll, 20 cubits long and 10 cubits wide. That, he explained to me, is the curse that goes out over the whole land. For everyone who has stolen, as is forbidden on one side of the scroll, has gone unpunished. And everyone who has sworn falsely, as is forbidden on the other side of it, has gone unpunished. But I have sent it forth, declares God of hosts, and the curse shall enter the house of the thief and the house of one who swears falsely by my name, and it shall lodge inside their houses and shall consume them to the last timber and stone.
Yeah. And so it's pretty visual. I mean, it's pretty, it seems pretty obvious what he sees, but like, we don't exactly know why a scroll has to be flying through the air with this message. I don't know. I mean, again, maybe there was something that people knew about from certain things and they'd say, oh yeah, the flying scrolls. We hear about those flying scrolls. We don't know. We don't have a context for it. Can't say, well, that's similar to it, because we don't have it and we don't know. So there's some speculation. Some people will try to bring in things and say, well, we have this story in this culture. And then people are like, but would they have known that? Would people have known those stories? So people look for these dreams and through them and try to find some similarities, some things that help us understand these contexts, but we don't really know. And we don't understand, why is it just people who've stolen and people who've sworn by, God's name? We don't know. So,
You don't see your presence. I don't remember seeing swearing falsely by God's name many times.
no, but it's in the Ten Commandments, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a big one, but yeah, we don't know why that one's picked. There's no, like, are those the worst? I mean, what about adultery? What about killing people? What about, like, there's so many other things you could also say, oh, those are 10 Commandments. So we really don't know why those two were picked, and we don't know why it has to be a scroll that's 20 by 10. I mean, it's a pretty big flying scroll. So yeah, like, we don't know. Clearly he says that's what happens, and who knows? Okay. So by the way, that's not the strangest one. I keep building it up, but there's one here that's just really, really interesting. Yeah.
Then the angel who talked with me came forward and said, now look up and note this other object that is approaching. I asked, what is it? And he said, this tub that is approaching, this, said he, is their eye in all the land. And behold, a disk of lead was lifted, revealing a female figure seated inside the tub.
Yeah,
That's pretty strange.
that's really strange. I mean,
You're a guy.
Josh said, not if you're a guy. Well, still, there's a tub and then there's a lid on the tub. Yeah, well, I'll show you. I'll just, yeah, so let's just, let's, let me just give you, let's see if I can even find a, yeah, I don't even know what to say. Woman in a tub. That's probably gonna give me some weird stuff. Yeah, this could be weird, but, no, I saw an image of it recently and it was pretty weird. Uh,
Kind of normal.
so, there's, yeah, no, I can't find it right now. There isn't a good picture of it coming up. But, yeah, yeah, I don't think many people have tried to draw this, even doesn't even seem like in the Middle Ages people drew it a lot, but I saw like a cartoon, like a animated version of it. But again, the tub is approaching. There's a woman in it. A disc of lead is lifted over the tub, and the woman's inside it. And what does it mean?
That, he said, is wickedness. And thrusting her back inside the tub, he pressed the leaden weight into the tub's mouth. I looked up again and saw two female figures come soaring with the wind in their wings. They had wings like those of a stork and carry off the tub between earth and sky. Where are they taking the tub? I asked the angel who talked with me.
Okay, so it was weird, right? And it was weird that there was a woman in a tub, right? But now the woman in the tub gets carried off by women that are flying. Just seeing if that couldn't bring up that picture either. It was in an animation thing, so I can't. So two female figures are soaring with wind in their wings. So they have wings, they're flying, but they have wings, like a stork, and they carry off the tub into the air. So the woman in the tub is wickedness. It says so. It's not good. She represents wickedness. See, John went right away to the woman in the tub, and sure enough, that's what everyone else did, which is, yeah, she represents wickedness. That's not what you should be thinking about. So, but the women, then these women sphinxes or whatever they are, they're carrying her away, right? They're carrying her away. Where are they going?
And he answered, to build a shrine for it in the land of Shinar. A stand shall be erected for it, and it shall be set down there upon the stand.
Yeah, so let's just show this. Shinar is Babylonia. And yeah, this is again pretty much
There are quite a few,
what notes
no, pictures. I see what people.
have drawn. Yeah.
No, not drawn, but yeah. Drawn.
So what do what do we make out of this vision of chapter 5? We don't really understand why this has to happen. Like, what is this scene that had to happen? We don't understand the context for this, other than there seems to be this issue that the Babylonians and people of Mesopotamia, the people in the land of Shinar, which is mentioned in Genesis, right? The land of Shinar is this land where the Tower of Babel is, right? These are people who worship these kind of things, and it's bad. So this kind of wickedness that's worshiped there is not good. It's not something they should be doing. Any comments? Any questions? So again, people have looked at these as like sphinxes. They represent things that are mentioned in other literature and things from the ancient Near East, but we really don't know. We really don't understand fully the context. I mean, we can kind of see it's like not a good thing. Wickedness is not a good thing. This is also something we're not supposed to do, but we really don't understand the context. This is the weirdest. What? What's your theory? Yeah, it's the male side.
They're skirting away.
Temptation. Okay. So they're getting rid of
Gives them
temptation.
picture.
Yeah. So there's definitely a woman. The women with the wings are, I mean, they're also part of this.
Well, the angels that are taking her away are just, that's their.
You think they're good angels?
Well, they're just task.
Okay.
It's the woman stuff that, at least the way, the picture I'm looking, it's not
So,
that bad.
no, I think,
Taking her
yeah,
temptation.
so I think John's point is that they're taking it away. But remember, they're not taking it away. They're not taking it away so that it gets away. They're taking it to Babylonia where it's going to be worshiped. They're going to worship it. It's going to be on a stand and they are going to worship it. They're building a shrine, a bait. This is what they worship. So no, it's telling us that we got to get this stuff away from us. To some extent, if that's what they're worshiping in Babylonia, then the message is we need to be back in the land of Israel. Because that's what they're doing there. Let's not be there. Let's not be around, to use John's word, temptation or wickedness. Let's not be around that. Let's not be in the land of Shinar. Let's be away from it. So to some extent, they could be saying we're getting that out of our neck of the woods. We're taking that away from us and we're bringing it back to where it comes from the land of Shinar. That's a possibility. That's the weirdest one in the sense that, like, it's just like stuff we don't ever see. And we don't see it a lot later. This stuff is weird, but we see it later and we see it. Oh, we really see it in some cases. Here we go.
I looked up again and I saw 4 chariots were coming out from between the 2 mountains. The mountains were of copper. The horses of the first chariot were bay. The horses of the second chariot were black. The horses of the third chariot were white. And the horses of the fourth chariot were spotted, dappled.
Yeah, these are all horse colors that you'd see. I mean, these are not crazy horse colors. These are not red, purple, horses that couldn't be this color, can't be this color. There's a gray horse, a white horse, a black horse, kind of a dappled color. Yeah, people know that horses were symbolic. We've already seen horses pop up in the Bible in the sense that, again, these are chariot horses. It says so right away. These are Merkava, right? These are war horses. These are horses that are impressive, that are scary. And people look at the horse colors and they represent things. I was at the Kentucky Derby this last weekend. People don't know. That's where I finished my trip. I did, but I didn't. I wasn't like some people who pick the horses based on their color. Some people said, you always bet on the bay. I'm like, come on, you can't do that. But you definitely look at horses and you look at them. And I saw one of the horses that everyone was betting on, Fierceness. And I looked at it and I said, that horse ain't big enough. And I looked at some of the horses and I'm like, that's a scary looking horse. That's a big horse. And so I looked at them more like, that's a big horse. But I do honestly, I feel bad for horses nowadays. I always wanted to go. It's definitely a bucket list thing to do, but I also didn't tell a lot of people. And I only say it because somebody posted a picture of me there. And I will tell you that I definitely have mixed feelings about it because there are way too many horses that are being put down now because they're something's gone wrong in horse racing. I mean, they've created monster horses that can't run anymore. And so I don't want to say I want to support this. I wish luckily that didn't happen at the race, but there was a horse last year I heard that got put down on the track. So that's, that definitely bothers me as someone who cares about animals, that, supporting an industry that doesn't treat animals great. So that's why I have mixed feelings about it. It also was something to see. It's a spectacle of Americana, and so
A lot of people there.
150,000 people. And I will tell you this, I've never seen 150,000 people, and they don't all leave at the same time. There's two races that go on after. They don't all leave at the same time, but there 100,000 people left when that race was over, and it was a beautiful exit, and it was very well coordinated. They do a great job. And so I will tell you that my hat, I did wear a hat. My hat's off to the people of Louisville for the way they handle that. And I did find the one vegan chicken place in Louisville to have some chicken at. And the guy was from LA. It's called Cosmic Bird. And he did a good sandwich, really good sandwich, seitan sandwich, chicken. But I will tell you that horses, though, for us have always been a symbol of strength and always been a symbol of like power, that they're beautiful animals. And it really is sad that we're not always treating them so well, but they can be frightening. They can be beautiful. And in this vision, they are definitely, we're starting to see the role that they play in prophecy. You can't introduce four horsemen anymore without immediately thinking about the apocalypse. You can't, because we all have heard of the four horsemen. Even if we haven't read the book of Revelation, we know that there's a story, the four horsemen. The four horsemen becomes, it's one of the most famous metaphors or allegories, of the Bible, even though it's in the Christian Bible. The famous version, this is where it starts from. This is the first version of four horsemen that we get. That four horsemen of Revelation, and there were other versions of four horsemen in rabbinic literature and midrash. It all starts here. It doesn't all start here. This is the first time we ever hear it.
Isn't it in the book of Daniel?
Yeah, but this is earlier. This is earlier.
Okay.
So four horsemen, that's what I want to say. Does it start here? We don't know. This is the first mention of it. So did it already exist as a symbol? Maybe, right? Maybe. But this is the first time in the Bible we have it. And so I want to be careful in saying the Christian version of this, I don't know that there's a direct line to this, but there's definitely a line. It starts here. It may have started earlier, but the Zechariah story was definitely known 500 years later by the Christian writers, 600 years later. So it started here. But so all I'm saying is, the later version better, even if you don't know it that well. But it's everywhere. Like, whatever. It's like a great Clint Eastwood movie, The Pale Rider. It's Pale Rider. It's because he's the horse of death, right? It's like seeped into so much of our literature and our culture, but it starts here. This is the first time we see it. Just want to make this very clear. You're reading an important introduction to Western civilization to some extent.
And I spoke up and asked the angel who talked with me, "What are those, my Lord?" In reply, the angel said to me, "Those are the four winds of heaven coming out after presenting themselves to the sovereign of all the earth. The one with the black horses is going out to the region of the north. The white ones have gone out to what is to the west of them. The spotted ones have gone out to the region of the south, and the dappled ones have gone out. They were ready to start out and range the earth, and he gave them the order, start out and range the earth."
Yes,
And they ranged the earth.
and they ranged the earth. And as Rosemary paused, we're missing something. So was there a scribal error here? We don't know. We don't have a version of again, knowing for sure what happens after we read the west, south. There seems to be a line that a scribe forgot to copy, because we don't have what happens with the last two. But there definitely seems to be, they're going off in every direction. The four horses represent the four directions, okay? And they work on God's behalf. And they represent, again, something else that we see in the ancient Near East and then later on in Greek and Greco-Roman mythology. They represent the four winds of heaven, right? That there are four winds that go off into the different directions, and they are the ones that kind of animate the seasons and animate life around all around the world. So they are directions, but they're also connected to they're connected to the seasons. And I will show you again, just because we've seen this before, and I want to share it with you right now. In all of the mosaics that we have from Israel, we find the winds in the corners of the mosaics. And let me just show you one of the ones that you've seen before. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Hold it. Remember, we also see it accompanied by versions of the zodiac, which are the different times of year, the different months. But let me see if I can make this big enough for you. Of sharing with you. You see the zodiac in the middle, right? This is the one in Tiberius, but you can see in the corners the different winds. And you can see they're depicted as having wings, and you can see the different the names for them here in the corners. So these are the winds, and they govern the seasons. So sometimes they're directional and sometimes they're connected to the seasons, but they're very important. Like, so here, the wind here for the winter, for example, they have those 3 months there that are part of the winter. These 3 months that are part of the spring. So, so you can see the different seasons depicted by the winds. So, I mean, this was so constant that 400, 300 years later, you still see the representation of these directions and of these winds. By the way, you know these directions, by the way. You know the winds. By the way, you know who probably knows all of them? I'm not going to put her on the spot, but Rosemary probably knows the names of the I don't want to put her on the spot.
Let's see. Boreas is north, and Zephyr, and Hesperus, and there's one more.
That's pretty good. I think you're I knew you'd know at least a couple of them, and you know some of them, people.
Mhm.
Eurus, you said Eurus and Boreas.
Yeah.
And wait, well, we know some of these words because they're, also might know him was Floyd. He knows them too. You might know him as well. But the winds are so Zephyr, you know the word Zephyr. You've heard the word Zephyr before. And Boreas, because you know the Aurora Borealis, you know the Northern Lights. So yeah, you know some of these winds. And again, the winds, depending on like whether they were good winds or bad winds, destructive winds or not destructive winds, more peaceful winds, bringing in a good season, like we have the Santa Anas in California, and, we don't like the Santa Anas if they're very destructive. These are winds that can be good or bad depending on the direction. And again, in the Middle East, they can be very dangerous if they are going to destroy their crops. So, but they work for God. It's very clearly in our understanding that they work for God. Now, again, in the Greek myths, they are somewhat under the control of the gods, but they kind of do their own thing. And so people used to worship those gods independently. They would worship Zephyr if they wanted a good west wind, or Boreas if they wanted a good northerly wind. They would worship those gods. So we can see it early on in our text that these are doing what God tells them to do. They go out and they do their job at God's behest. So here's what it says.
Then he alerted me and said to me, take good note. Those that went out to the region of the north have done my pleasure in the region of the north.
Yeah, and as you notice right here, it says, let's look more on, the note here. Why? Babylonia, right? And so if this is specifically about the north, then it's basically saying God is doing to Babylonia what God wanted to do to Babylonia. So, assumedly, that is the punishment and what's happening in that region. Zechariah, remember, is speaking from Israel. And when he speaks about what's happening in the north, he's talking about the people who are in power now, the Babylonians and the Persians, but he's saying, what's happening there, what's happening in that region is what God wants to happen. Okay, so that's this vision of the horses. Let's go to the next, because there's 8 prophecies. There's 8 of them. We're not going to finish all of them today, but we're going to see some of them. See some more.
The word
Next
of God came to me, received from the exiled community, from Heldai, Tobiah, and Jediah, who have come from Babylon. And you in turn proceed the same day to the house of Josiah, son of Zephaniah. Take silver and gold and make crowns. Place one on the head of the high priest, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, and say to him, thus said the God of hosts, behold, a man called the branch shall branch out from the place where he is, and he shall build the temple of God. He shall build the temple of God and shall assume majesty, and he shall sit on his throne and rule. And there shall also be a priest seated on his throne, and harmonious understanding shall prevail between them.
So this is where, this is more about the branch, right? The Zerubbabel. And Zerubbabel and Joshua are going to get along. The priest and the king are going to get along. It's going to be good for them. It's going to be good for everybody. They're going to rule together, and it's all going to be good. Now, again, this is not a vision. This is not a vision. This is an order that Zechariah is supposed to deal with these representatives that are coming. Now, when he says that they're representatives from the community of Babylonia, it reminds us that there still are a lot of Jews not in Israel. As a matter of fact, the majority of them are not in Israel. And what is going on here is we've got some people coming from Babylonia to check out what's happening here. They want to know whether this is the time to come back home. And Zechariah's message and Haggai's message and Malachi's message, these 3 prophets who work at this time, are yes, it's time to come home. It's time to come home. It's time to rebuild. Don't be sitting in Babylonia anymore. And so when we see that there's wickedness, this wicked statue, this wicked idol that's in Babylonia, when we see that God's winds are going out to Babylonia right now, the message is don't be there anymore. You need to be here back in Israel. You need to come home. Look, we're going to read in the book of Ezra that people are still coming home, and the big waves haven't even come yet. Ezra is one of those leaders who's bringing back a huge wave. He's going to bring back a huge wave of people in this period, but it's not immediate. The people didn't all come right away. Look, this is the 76th year of Israel coming right now. The initial waves that came to Israel were waves that came from the 1880s to the 1920s, what we call the first Aliyah. Then Jews who came during the persecutions that went on in Germany in the early years of the Holocaust, from 33 to 38, 40, when some Jews were able to come in before England really turned off the ability to do that, which is when they went to war with Germany. When the war started in 1941, when it started in 39, it started 41 for us, and 39 when it started for England, that's when England said, we're at war, we can't upset the Arabs, don't let any more Jews in. But from 33 to 38, if you were able to get out from Germany and Austria, there were Jews who came. Not a lot, but some. Couldn't come after 38, 39. Then there were Jews that came after the Holocaust. And then there were the waves of Jews who came after they were thrown out of their Arab countries that they lived in. The 2 million Jews from Iraq and Syria and Egypt and North Africa and Turkey, and all those Jews who came to Israel during those waves. And then there was a wave of Jews that came from the former Soviet Union in the late 80s, when the Soviet Union collapsed. And then there was a wave of Jews that came from Ethiopia when Ethiopia collapsed and finally let Jews out of their country. Those have been the main waves of Jews that have come in the last 76 years. The last major wave of Jews to Israel came when the Ethiopians and Russians came in the late 80s, early 90s. There are still 7 or 8 million Jews that aren't in Israel right now, that are in the diaspora.
Is that including us?
Including us. We're 6 million of those, 5.5, 6 million of those. A disproportionate amount of Jews in America. What will happen one day if America no longer becomes a country where Jews feel comfortable to live? The reason we don't live in Israel, folks, is because we believe we have a better life here than we would in Israel. How do you not, let's be honest, that's the reason we don't live there. We're drawn to it. We love Israel. We love the fact that there is an Israel, but we choose not to live there. There may be a time when Jews in America will say, it's better for us to live in Israel than it is in America.
Then who will speak for the Jews in America?
That will be a
Israel
problem.
needs our support.
Yeah, that'll be a problem. And again, some will make the argument that that's one of the roles that American Jews play. That's what you and I do in America, is help advocate for Israel here. Guess what? If every one of us left, there would still be about 40 to 50, 60 million American evangelical Christians who are way more powerful than us in the advocate for Israel. I want to tell you something, folks. If you think that the reason why Mike Johnson in Louisiana supports Israel is because of you, you are delusional. You are an idiot. Don't be an idiot. The reason why the American public supports Israel is largely because they have evangelical leaders who preach and love and tell people to support Israel. Not because you and I are good people, or because we're nice to people in our neighborhood, or because you are a great emissary for the Jewish people and for Israel. You are delusional if you believe that.
I've been called worse.
It's not so bad just to be delusional. But for American Jews who think that they are the reason why Israel is being supported by America, get over yourself. And I do my best. Everybody knows I do my best. But I don't believe that if I wasn't here, that if I was in Israel, that it would make any bit of difference. So I
I don't know. That's their perception right now. Their perception of Christianity, but that hasn't always been in the past.
It hasn't been always the case, and it may not always be the case, but it is now. But the issue, Gail, this is the real issue. Again, this is where, look, we can all feel good about it, and we can all like I said, delude ourselves that it makes a difference. I will tell you this. If it changed, your presence would not change it. You know how I know that? Because the people who should be supporting us are burning our flag and are deriding Israel and Jews right now on college campuses. Those are the people that should be supporting us, and they're not. So if you think that those people are going to change their mind if the evangelical Christians stop supporting us, you are also delusional. And look, I mean, Jewish people have been delusional for a long time, and that's how we get killed. So I'm saying, look, there's worse things. Mike just said there's worse things than being delusional. But one of the worst things worse than being delusional is being dead. And I'm not going to be, I don't want my kids or grandkids, I don't want the people who come after me. So I will make it very clear to them that these are the facts. This is the truth. There is no amount of money, or I don't care how important AIPAC is. I love AIPAC. I'll do everything for AIPAC. But if AIPAC didn't have an evangelical community behind it, it would be ridiculous to think that Israel would be supported as it is right now. So just understand that. Lindsey Graham, Mike Johnson, Mitch McConnell, everybody who goes on TV and talks about how important Israel right now, it is. It is not because of you as a Jew, okay? Just understand that.
That's what's so
be
scary about this time.
It's a very, Gail, it's a
the
very
next
scary,
generation coming
it's
up.
it's a very scary time. But what our job is to document the truth, to tell people the truth, and again, not to encourage delusion, not to be delusional about it. I have wonderful relationships with the evangelical community. I'll continue to maintain that, and I'll continue to do everything I have to do, but I'm not delusional about it. Okay, so, and I'll tell people that, and that's why I just told you just now. So we live in times that are very, very similar to these times, which are, there's a homeland we have. Quite frankly, our Israel is much stronger than this guy's Israel was. Zechariah's Israel was nowhere near as powerful as our Israel is, thank God. But again, doesn't mean that like we ever have to stop being vigilant, but let's be honest about it. Let's be forthright about it. And let's learn from this. Let's learn from these people who told us thousands of years ago. And by the way, my ancestors, my grandparents and great-grandparents who looked at Israel in the 1930s and 40s, they could have gone to Israel. They looked at it and said, that country's never going to succeed. I mean, they did that. Yours did that. Everybody's did that. And they decided, no, you know what? We'll take a pass on that. We're doing pretty good in America. We'll bet on America. And guess what? They did okay. They weren't wrong. But they were wrong about Israel. Who's? Their agenda is that if we all live in Israel and Jesus comes back, then that fulfills biblical prophecy. And this is all part of a great biblical prophecy that's unfolding. And that's been the biblical prophecy that has been upheld by the evangelical community pretty much since the 70s. But it's not very old, by the way. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that. As Gail just said, it hasn't been like that. Gail knows better than anybody. Gail, tell them where you live.
What, when I used to live in like Arrowhead or now?
Well, no, where do you live now?
Oh, I live in Ukaipa.
Yeah,
In
there's a lot of Jews in Ukaipa, right, Gail?
Right,
So-
yeah.
So she knows from what she speaks, but I'm telling you, this is where we live right now. But we got to learn from this. We got to learn from these people, and we have to learn again from our ancestors who said, "Look, hey, maybe I'll come back. Maybe and you know what? That's why I say to my kids or my grandkids, one day, God willing, I'll say to them, look, maybe you'll find a home in Israel, and you know what? Your decision might be based on a reality that I don't have, and I didn't have. And I'm going to tell them, look, I didn't make the decision. My parents, my grandparents didn't make that decision. You might make that decision. And you know what? Hopefully it'll be a good one. That's all we can hope for. And again, because it comes down at the end of the day, who are these guys? Heldai, Tobiah, and Jediah? I don't know who they are. They didn't know who they are. We never see these guys again. Never again. We don't know who these people are. But they're part of a community that comes and checks it out. Hey, what's going on here? Should we come home? Should we make this journey? It's a much harder journey in those days. That was done on foot and on a horse. But these guys were looking at it the same way we've been looking at it for the last 76 years. All right. Keep going.
Take silver and gold and make crowns. Place one on the head of high priest Joshua, son of Jehozadak, and say to him, Thus said God of hosts, behold, a man called the branch shall branch out from the place where he is, and he shall build the temple of God. Read this.
Yeah.
He shall, the crowns shall remain in the temple of God as a memorial to Helem, Tobiah, Jediah, and Hen, son of Zephaniah. People from far away shall come and take part in the building of the temple of God, and you shall know that I have been sent to you by God of hosts, if only you will obey the eternal your God.
Yeah. And that's it. So let these people know it's time to come home, right? Let these people know. And again, Hen is not mentioned there. In the other one, it's Josiah mentioned, but again. Let's read one more. That was not really a prophecy, by the way. That was actually, this was not a vision. That's not a vision. This part is a vision, right? And then the rest of this from from verse 9. All right? This is not a vision.
In the 4th year of King Darius, on the 4th day of the 9th month, Kislev, the word of God came to Zechariah, when Bethel, Sharezer, and Regem Melech and his men sent to entreat the favor of God, and to address this inquiry to the priests of the house of God and to the prophets. Shall I weep and practice abstinence in the 5th month, as I have been doing all these years?
What just happened? What just happened? This tells us that Tisha B'Av is a holiday by this point. He just said, shall I still do my Tisha B'Av ritual? I've been doing Tisha B'Av my whole life. And he just said, do we still do this? Do we still weep for the destruction of Jerusalem? We're rebuilding Jerusalem. Do we do this anymore? And there are people who have said today, are we supposed to still keep Tisha B'Av when Israel has been rebuilt? Is Tisha B'Av over? Is a day of weeping, is a day of fasting, is a day of sadness? Should that no longer be a holiday? We've had that question in our own day. Unfortunately, today, most people don't celebrate Tisha B'Av. They don't keep Tisha B'Av. They don't remember Tisha B'Av. It's a very important holiday. It's one that I've advocated in the past for people. Again, it usually comes in the summer, so people aren't really, but it's an important thing to think about. What was lost 2,000 years ago? What was lost 2,500 years ago? Because the day becomes the day where we remember both temples. But at this point, the second temple hadn't been destroyed yet. The temple, the Romans, that's still 500 years away. But already Jews are starting to say, but we're rebuilding the temple. No, let's watch what happens.
Thereupon the word of hosts, God of hosts, came to me. Say to all the people of the land and to the priests, when you fasted and lamented in the 5th and 7th months, all these 70 years, did you fast for my benefit?
Again, he's talking about the fast that people did, again, not just for Tisha B'Av, but also for the month of Tammuz, right? When the walls were breached. And so this is what people are asking. For 70 years, we've been doing this. What do? And here's what God says, right? When you did it, did you do it for me? Did you do it for God? Right? Did you do it for me?
And when you eat and drink, who but you does the eating, and who but you does the drinking? Look, this is the message that God proclaimed through the earlier prophets. when Jerusalem and the towns about her were peopled and tranquil, when the Negev and the Shephelah were peopled, and the word of God came to Zechariah, and the word
No,
of God to
it
Zechariah continued.
no, it ends there. That's
Oh, okay.
That's the message. It ends here, right? This is the end. And so what God says to them, when you eat and drink, are you doing it for me? When you fast, are you doing it for me? It's not for me that you're doing it. I don't get any benefit out of you eating or drinking or fasting. You do it for yourself, right? And you're doing it to remember again, essentially what you lost, right? And he says, I've told the prophets this for hundreds of years, that your actions in this world are for you. They're to teach you. They're not for me. When Isaiah says famously, "Are you fasting on my account? Are you on Yom Kippur doing this? And you think that I'm going to do something because you're fasting?" God said this before. This is not, and God's saying it again. This is so you remember. This is so you take to heart this lesson. So here's your answer.
And the word of God to Zechariah continued, Thus said God of hosts, execute true justice, deal loyally and compassionately with one another. Do not defraud the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and the poor, and do not plot evil against one another. But they refused to pay heed. They presented a bulky back and turned a deaf ear. They hardened their hearts like adamant against heeding the instruction and admonition that God of hosts sent to them by divine spirit through the earlier prophets, and a terrible wrath issued from God of hosts. Even as they were called and they would not listen, so, said God of hosts, let them call, and I will not listen. I dispersed them among all the nations that they had not known, and the land was left behind them desolate, without any who came and went. They caused a delightful land to be turned into a desolation.
Yep. And so God tells them, again, you've been punished, right? This goes back to this whole, again, we don't exactly know what, again, this delegation means when they come to them, but it says they came to him in Kislev, which is the wintertime, right? It's the month of Hanukkah, but 2 weeks before Hanukkah, the 9th of Kislev. And again, what's the message that Zechariah is giving these people? This is not a vision. This is God telling them, you're worried about Tisha B'Av, and I'm telling you, again, that's not what God cared about. That's not why the temple was destroyed in the first place. It's because you didn't offer sacrifices or because you didn't do your ritual well. You're not treating people well. You didn't have justice. You didn't deal compassionately with each other. You didn't take care of the most vulnerable in your community. And so I scattered you. I destroyed you. I destroyed my cities. I destroyed my community, right? I destroyed my land, a delightful land, right? Eretz Chemda. I turned this delightful land into a desolation. So God didn't want us to fast or to sacrifice or to do any of these other rituals unless they actually made us better people. And that's what he just told them. So that's not really a vision. What we're going to finish with, we're done for today, we're going to get back into some visions. And that's what we're going to finish with. So the last chapters, when we get into these last chapters, we're going to see another set of visions. And kind of in these last chapters. And again, there's a structure to these visions. There's a structure to, what Zechariah will describe. And you'll see when we get to the next set, I'm not sure, again, based on what we have in front of us, we're probably going to go, because it ends here in chapter 14, we're probably going to read for 2 more weeks Zechariah. Next week we'll be starting with chapter 8, but we'll see. I'm not sure. I mean, we're not going to be in a rush to go through it, but again, every week I told you, almost every week we read something from the prophets that is a line that kind of sticks out in our minds. A famous one is not by might, not by power. But again, there's other lines in this that I think, even when I read them, however many times I've read it, there are lines that stick out in my head. And again, a different place that I'm coming from, and I'm definitely coming from a place now where it's impossible for me not, especially today, not to be thinking, we just came out of Yom HaShoah. Our next day of remembrance is Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, which goes into Yom HaTzmaut. And I saw pictures this year from the March of the Living trip, which has been going on. People were in Israel or were in Poland, and now they're going to be heading to Israel for the March of the Living. My 2 oldest kids went on that trip, and this year, how can you not be thinking about October 7th on that trip and the survivors? And there still are a few survivors, thankfully, able to go on these trips. Survivors spending time with these kids who are in high school, going off to college soon, and knowing that they're entering into a situation which is not safe in some cases, and a lot of these kids who are graduating this year, folks, I don't know what else to tell you, but going on this trip, on the March of the Living trip, when they go to college in the fall, just the fact that they went to Israel could create a situation where they've made enemies simply by going on that trip. So
Speak about Israel, what do you guys do?
we're not going.
You're not taking the word?
No, his kids, other kids. I've talked about this a little bit. I guess I didn't tell you. Yeah, the reason we're not going is we had 5-6 kids that actually filled out the paperwork. We had 25 kids that filled out the paperwork at high holidays or around high holidays when I announced the trip, and 5 of them signed up. And I will tell you that most of the kids who didn't sign up didn't do it because their parents told them not to. In some cases, their parents encouraged them to go. And in almost every case, the kids just didn't feel it was the right time to go. It was the kids that chose, not the parents, which leads me to believe that they did not want to deal with the aggravation of having to explain to their college friends why they went to Israel right now. So, look, I don't know that that's the case in every one of those situations. Look, this isn't a great time to go to Israel for certain things. If you've been to Israel before, like John's kids have been to Israel, they don't need to be in the experience of what Birthright mainly does, which is give people a survey of the country. Gives them a very superficial and cursory and important, it sounds bad, but gives them a very important introduction. But it's 9 days in country. You're 8 or 9, probably like 8 days that you're actually touring around. So it's not you can't do a lot, and it's a free trip. And so, it's what do you say? It's a free trip, and there are abilities to extend, and there are always options to stay longer, and there's programs where people can stay longer, but people don't normally do that. It's not like they even know about that in some cases. But anyways, the point is that it's not a good time to go because entire parts of the northern part of the country you can't go to right now. So you can't go to Tzfat, you can't go to the Golan Heights. You can't go there because those areas have been evacuated. People don't remember that there's tens of thousands. Yes. That doesn't mean everyone's not there, but they're encouraged not to be there. But all the area around Kiryat Shmona, all the areas around Kfar Bloom and all those kibbutzim up there, they've encouraged people not to be there. So it's a little bit below Tzfat is where they're telling people, you know, they're kind of say it's safe to be, but like 5 miles away. But any of the areas that are in Hezbollah shelling areas, easy to be hit. The people are not living there. So there's tens of thousands of Israelis that are not living in the north, and tourists can't go there. So if tourists can't go there, it means birthright's not going there. Anywhere that's closed up, they're not going. So if you're a birthright student and you're not gonna be able to go to Tzfat, to me, that's not fair, right? I wouldn't put a kid into a situation. That's one of the reasons why I didn't push hard on it. When they told me I could still go, or they were combining it with another trip, they were like, you can go on that trip. And I'm like, but first of all, I have no say over that itinerary. And even worse, there's parts of the country that I can't even take kids to right now. I don't know that I want to go. So it's not a good situation. And I have to tell you, I didn't fight it. Okay. So
It's still like,
I would take kids who've been to Israel before, but not in a context of a birthright trip. But I would take kids on a trip where they got to help out and got to do volunteer efforts, which we actually talked about, but it wasn't something that they don't have a trip that there's trips like that, and I'm working on maybe getting some information out on that if I know that they're going to actually happen. But there are trips where kids can go, and I'll just show you one real quick. There are trips where kids can go and do some volunteer experiences right now, and they do exist, but they're not birthright trips. So I'll just show you real quick. This is one of the ones that they have. This is one called Birthright Israel Onward. And you get a flight stipend. They give you a subsidy, subsidy for the flight, and then you get a weekly stipend of $100. So they give kids like some spending money but while they're there, they're volunteering. The good thing about it, as you can see, is you can still go on a birthright trip. It doesn't take you out of eligibility for birthright. So you can still go, but yeah. So this is a possibility, but this is not for kids this is not a birthright trip. This is not, you don't travel around. It's not the itinerary at all of birthright. So you're there as a volunteer. So again, it's a good thing, but it's not a birthright. It's not a birthright thing. So this is something that we've been talking about. Yeah, we're in person next week, but no, we're not in person next week. I can't remember. Wait a second. Let me look real quick. It's a very important question you're just asking me right now. We are in person next week. Not on Wednesday night though.
why?
Because I'm in Arizona. Quiet. I'm going to a Dodger game.
Are they in Arizona next
No,
week?
they're in San Francisco next week. Stop it. You don't even like the Dodgers. All right, everybody. You were born a Dodger.
Born in Minnesota.
I was born here. I'm a
So was I.
I'm a
I think
Viking
that
fan.
was for-
I know, but I love, yes, that's true. All right, everybody, take care and have a great rest of the week. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.